Okay. Welcome, everyone. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting. It's an amazing space. Hope everyone is energized for multiple weeks of blockchain stuff to go. And today I'll talk about growing DAOs. I'm sure all of you are in one way or another already know about DAOs, so I'm going to skip a lot of intro. But before that, I actually want to talk about the naming because I think DAO is very misleading and also very kind of not inviting for new people to come. And I suggest two different names that you can use when you're explaining to people what the hell you're doing. So first one is digital collective. So collectives and cooperatives are things that have been existing for hundreds of years, and people know what they are. And we're really turning them into a lot more flexible model with DAOs. And the other one, which is way more accessible, is Facebook group with a bank account. Right? Really, we're turning what people are already doing on Facebook, with Google Groups, with all those things. Right? There have been communities and collectives before. And we're really giving them power to make decisions, to coordinate, and to use money to actually grow themselves, right? And so, like, an example I really like is Women of Impact, right? It's a Facebook group, which is pretty big, that supports women around the world. And they right now don't have a bank account. They don't have a way to collect funds and distribute them, right? You actually need to use National Geographic to coordinate all this stuff instead of actually the women themselves in this group. So, in a way, DAOs are just a tool that actually expands way beyond what regular companies or collectives or cooperatives that, government-sanctioned kind of organizations, and makes them borderless global. It makes them really easy to set up, and it allows you to change the structure over time. And that's the main thing of my talk is actually that you can change the structure over time and doesn't need to be kind of designed from the day one. So why DAOs, right? Well, because you want to have this flexibility, right? We're living in a world that's changing all the time. Like the corporate structure that was set out in kind of corporate law hundreds of years ago doesn't always fit in the modern internet world, right? Where people are working in multiple projects at the same time, right? Not everyone is full-timely employed. We don't have as much hierarchy anymore. We don't need it because we have a lot more kind of flexible models of coordination now. You're able to invest in public goods in many ways, similarly how governments do this, right? Like before we would need a government to create a fund to invest in roads and infrastructure, and now you can actually have these communities and organizations invest in something that they know is beneficial without a clear financial outcome. And so we're really starting to replace a lot of conventional organizations and creating new incentive structures and kind of giving freedom to people to organize in new ways. So there are many ways you can actually use a DAO, right? So, I think the talk that Aragon before was talking, like, there's tons of ways, right? Like, you can create businesses, you can create clubs, you can create investment DAOs, you can do charities and like any other structures that you want. So, the thing is, like, we've had already quite a few years of DAOs, right? And we're still learning and figuring out. And so I wanted to kind of walk through some of the learnings that we've had so far. And first one is, even though it is supposed to be decentralized and community-driven, it doesn't mean you don't need to have leadership, right? Leadership is paramount for any DAO, right? Felipe before, right, is spearheading DAOist and making sure it's happening, even though it's DAO, even though, like, there's a lot of community people kind of around, there needs to be some leadership that drives things forward. And the more kind of product-oriented the DAO is, the more you're trying to build something specific as a product, the more concrete this leadership needs to be. Governance doesn't scale, right? Making decisions doesn't scale, and we know that because of democracy and all of those things have tried before, right? Like literally 2,000 years of kind of history of how democracy has been trying to figure this out. And so you need some representation. You need some form of kind of aggregation of voting power and delegation to make sure that you're actually having a kind of consistent decision making. Fragmentation is inevitable. This is one thing that's actually completely different from, regular companies. A regular company, the goal is to become a monopoly, to become the biggest thing ever in the world, right? Look at Facebook, at Apple, at Google, right? They're all trying to become bigger. And the thing with DAOs, you're actually not designed to become bigger. You're fine with half of the DAO splitting off with some completely different idea that how they want to go, right? This is actually where the power of this ability to fork your community, to fork your DAO, to fork your blockchain is coming in and empowering people to kind of have more freedom. And it's desired, right? Because you don't want kind of clash of different opinions constantly blocking things, and you are able to have this kind of things naturally. You also want DAOs to have clear goals. It's kind of the clearer the goal is, the better and more decisive action you can enact, right? Like building a specific product as a DAO, this is a super clear goal. Everybody can kind of circle around it, grab their ideas, bring them together, start building stuff. Like we've had simple example of like, hey, we want to build this specific game. Let's start a DAO. Here's Telegram community. Everybody's starting to bring ideas. Versus if you say, hey, let's do an investment DAO. We're going to be investing in cool projects. It becomes a lot less clear what actually people should be bringing to the table. And oligopoly doesn't work, right? So this is where, one token, one vote. That stuff that just doesn't work because the people who are kind of trading on the token are not going to vote, and the people who are doing most of the work may not have the kind of a lot of tokens to actually vote the decision and drive forward, right? This is why you need some kind of delegation. This is why you need some form of, ideally, meritocracy, but meritocracy is really hard to achieve, right? Like it's really hard to actually measure how much impact has a specific person done. So coordination, right? At the end, we want kind of things to be done, and so you need coordination. And so I think the most important in any DAO is a whip. And so this is kind of taking from the political, like US political kind of system. The whip in the party is a person who is pretty much responsible to get everyone in line and actually vote and make decisions, right? Literally from, whipping people. And so this is really important because in DAOs, right, everybody's super busy. Everybody's doing a bunch of like other projects, and it's really hard to get people sometimes to vote, even when you make the voting, the process itself very easy. And so kind of as the organization grows, you need some whip who actually will be driving this forward. As well, you need the clear mission, right? So like as you're starting a DAO, as you maybe spinning off a separate sub-DAO inside a big organization, the clearer the mission kind of you define, and the more dedicated team you want with that mission. So again, like if you're building a specific product, like let's build this specific game, or let's build this specific DeFi product, let's change something, like let's organize a specific hub in Lisbon. You need a specific team to actually do it because this kind of needs a lot of time and resources from these people. And we have DAOs and tech, which is awesome, which allows us to codify a lot of processes, which allows us to do this coordination, but we still need social protocols because there's still a bunch of stuff you cannot codify, and this is where the code of conduct and kind of constitution type of things come in. They're important for any DAO to make sure that what's not codified, what's beyond the code, is actually still handled, right? You actually explain to people how to behave in your community beyond just kind of vote yes or no, right? And so there's also an important learnings around ownership and goals, right? When you started the DAO, right, you have some vision, and as kind of a founder, you take ownership of that vision. You take kind of responsibility, you drive it forward, you kind of enact leadership. And so as you do this, right, you set clear goals and clear kind of next steps for the community as a whole. And obviously that's an art, right, and setting the goals, and this is where like kind of founders' creativity comes in. But as the DAO grows, you actually shift from this vision casting to policing, right? You're actually changing from kind of, here's a vision, you want to bring people on board, you want everybody to know exactly what you stand for, to actually being more of defining the structure and kind of policing in a way that everybody is working together, right? So like people now starting to coordinate. There's a lot more kind of creativity coming from bottom up, and now you are really focused more on like everybody is working together. And that's why it's important to have this kind of transition of ownership from the early founders and early kind of starters to people who would be kind of moderators and kind of community leaders going forward that will maintain this momentum and let other people to drive the kind of creativity forward. And so this ownership is important, and it can come in the form of identity, like reputation, tokens, etc. But it's important to build this into your DAO kind of as you growing it, because otherwise, when this time comes, when your DAO becomes big enough and you don't have this ability to transition this power and ownership, you may kind of lose the momentum in the growth. So kind of summarizing all this, there are a set of growth stages for any DAO that we have, right? So we don't start the DAO with like, here's a huge organization, with thousands of people that will be voting for everything with their tokens. We start with a small group which has efficient communication. You don't need clear social protocols yet because you know each other one way or another. And this is when you start to set kind of initial mission and kind of culture of this DAO, right? And again, like, what Felipe was saying, like, right, core members, you have then the elders, the people who he's talking together with, right? This is that example. And then you start inviting new people, right? Like, it's friends of friends, it's kind of people who are excited about this mission because you tweeted about it or had some media about it. And so this is where you need to kind of figure out how to build reputation for these people. How, like, other people can understand that this member has been there for longer or has just joined, and they are just kind of learning about the rules here. And then over time, you need to start formalizing this, right? Again, like, you don't need to set up all the formalized incentives when you have a group of 10 people, but as you grow into 100, this is where you actually want to have kind of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, right? Like, not everything needs to be a token, not everything needs to be kind of monetary. You can actually, like, there's a lot of people are motivated by, enacting change, by having reputation in this DAO, in this community. And this is where you're setting up these rules. So as you grow and kind of evolve, right, this is where initial members kind of maybe fading away a little bit, and then this like new structure starting to evolve, right, and maybe things split up and kind of start like mutate beyond what, as your founder were kind of originally imagining, that it starts to turn into something different. And that's the exciting part, right? This is something that's different from like normal kind of companies and organizations where it's always will be kind of the structure that you set up in the beginning. So kind of important roles, right? I call them kind of VIP or executive. This is really like someone who is driving forward, making sure that everybody's on point, everybody votes. You have kind of a decisions to take and strategy to kind of execute. Council, this is somebody who are actually, are actively participating. They may be not, like, they're probably not full-time, but they are kind of the active participants. So, like, in DAOist case, this will be elders. And then you have community, right, kind of broader kind of participants who are actually, bringing in and maybe becoming council or coming and going. There's also a bunch of like other ways, other roles that you can define, people who are making decisions about money, like in kind of if you have a huge treasury, you probably need to have a separate group that is doing investments. If you have protocol to govern, you probably need developer group that actually is doing development. So you have like lots and lots of roles then based on the functions you have. And then just to kind of mention, the communities themselves, the DAOs themselves can interact in many different ways, right? So as I mentioned, like you want sometimes some community to fork, right, to split off. You want some communities to be member of another communities. They can be working together. They can be funded by each other. They can be competing, right? They can be actually in the direct competition. And so all those different ways, right, you can actually like codify and interact with this. So I just wanted to kind of mention like how we putting all this together, right? All those learnings that we have about growing DAOs. And so we have a framework called Sputnik DAO that is pretty much enabling people to do all those things, right, around their communities and in nearest case guilds to really build and expand their mission. So kind of this is an ecosystem. It's not just one app. It's actually like set a smart contract and then a lot of different front ends and interfaces to interact with it, right? So you have things like Astra DAO, which recently launched. You have Sputnik Fund. You even have a Telegram bot where you can literally add it in your Telegram group and then start creating and voting on stuff from your Telegram. So like if you want to check it out, because you can literally create a DAO right now from your phone in the Telegram, and then start interacting with it. So the important piece here is that DAO is an account itself, right? So it's not just it's an agent that can interact with everything else in the system, which means it can pretty much do any action on chain. And so you also have all those kind of console community members and roles with flexible voting structure. So you set up permissions pretty much per each group. What can they do, right? Can they vote? Can they use money? Can they transfer? Can they update protocol? Can they do, for example, a poll? And so all that allows you to actually kind of customize and create the structure that you want. And that's my point. And then on top of it, you can actually vote on upgrading the structure. You can upgrade your structure of your DAO at any point, which allows you to kind of have this growth of the system. The other thing is, as I mentioned, oligopoly is not always the best way, but you still want sometimes to have a token as a way to have some delegation or some weighting. So what Sputnik DAO allows you to do is actually to start a DAO without a token, and then actually use your community to vote to create a token and use it as a voting to kind of to weight your votes and delegate and do all those things. And you can set up how you want weighting to be done. It can be quadratic voting. It can be any pretty much function on top of that. You can even use actually other chains' balances. You can literally have your token issued on Ethereum and vote with it on Near without transferring the funds. And you can always use NFTs as well. So there's a bunch of kind of features that I'm going to skip through, but one thing I really want to mention is streaming payments. So I think DAOs actually, with streaming payments, are able to start paying salaries to people because you can vote once to pretty much commit to pay somebody's salary at this speed, right? This much, ETH, Near, whatever per second, and now people are receiving salaries or other DAOs receiving kind of a contract. So just to finish up, there is over 100 DAOs already. You should check out the app.astrodao. There will be a hidden workshop right in the shade. There's over 1 million in past 30 days. And if you're creating your own DAO and you want to get funded up to 10K, apply at daocubator.com. Thank you.